Let's have a look at some ideas with automating a Reverb plugin as you use it to do some sound design. And I'm going to start with this little music excerpt here. And right now we have just 4 tracks, just a little groove here. Sounds like this. So we have a pad, a drum beat, little bass part, and then a sort of a Vox pad. So when we think about automation and reverb, one of the things we think about a lot, of course, is automating a send level, and that's a pretty common thing to do in music mixing. So the idea here, for example, is on this drum beat, I have this send level automated going to bus 1, and this goes to a reverb with a fairly straightforward reverb setup. So let me solo this drum beat, and this is without the reverb send. And I'm going to turn it on, and you'll see this level change right here. This is the automation. So the idea is just on the backbeats, we have a push in the send level, and we drop just the snare strike to the reverb. And again, it's a pretty straightforward reverb setup with a low diffusion, so it's got a bit of grit to it. You know, we could smooth it out if we wanted to. Like so. This is the original. But there's other things we can do with automating reverbs. Here, for example, we have automation of a reverb that's actually inserted on that pad track here, this reverb here. Now, if I shut off this automation, it'll just simply play through this reverb here. And soloed. Which could be a cool effect. You can see it's a balance of dry and wet. But the automation is a little more interesting here. There's automation of a couple of things here, room size and also room density. And so the idea here, I'll put this back to volume. The idea here is that we have both room size and the density of the room modulated with the backbeat. And you can actually see a little bit of automation here, especially you'll see with room size, this graphic will change. So it adds a bit of a pulse. This was the original with no reverb. Now it's got a bit of a pulse and it kind of expands in size. Now, if you listen carefully, you can hear a little bit of crinkling, a little bit of, ticks and pops. And that's because when you automate room size while it's passing audio, it makes glitches in the audio. And that actually can be kind of charming, kind of interesting, a little lo-fi kind of effect. So it's something that we would expect, something that just happens with automating room size. Here, I'll go just to the early reflections. We'll hear it a little more clearly. It's still pretty interesting, and again, it just adds a little bit of motion to the sound and gets it to pulsate with the music a little bit. Let's look at a couple of other examples here. I've got a drum beat here, sending to bus 3, which is this reverb, and on this reverb, on this aux track here, we have a number of parameters getting automated here. Again, room size and the density of the room. So it's a similar kind of idea, but this time on a bus send to an aux track here. So it sounds like this. Without the reverb. still a cool drum beat, but this just adds a whole bunch of excitement to it. And again, the way it changes in terms of the room size and also the density here. It just adds a little bit of energy to the drum beat. Here's another example. We'll do some sound design examples here. Here's a crash. And again, just a couple of parameters automated. This time the reverb is on the track itself. And this is with no reverb. Just, a typical impact sound here. But now we have automation of a couple of parameters here. So reverb time, density, and diffusion. And again, you'll see graphically, you'll see the parameters change. So the idea, it starts off very dense, and then both density and diffusion decrease, and then the reverb time tightens up as well. And the end of it, instead of being a diffuse tail, is more of a hard sputter. Where maybe, without the automation, it's your standard continuous tail, and that can also be an interesting sound design idea. But here, what's interesting is the way it decays into something less expected. Last example, way out here, I've got another sound design element. This is a motor of some sort that's coming to a stop. So right now, without any reverb, it sounds like this. Kind of cool sound to begin with. And then here with some automation, I'll turn on the reverb, and you can see we have, once again, a number of automated parameters, including the spread of the reverb tail, the reverb time itself. The low ratio comes up and the diffusion decreases. And again, it's just going to create a different sound. You'll see these parameters change in the movie. And what's interesting is that when the spread decreases, remember, it just creates a bit of like a resonator kind of effect. And the idea here is that as the spread decreases, it goes from being a diffuse reverb tail to that kind of resonator effect. And it feels like a spring of some sort. A very different kind of sound there, and an interesting sound design element. So these are just some of the many, many, many things you could try automating actual reverb parameters in a reverb like Platinum Verb.